Jason never thought his world would come crashing down over a forgotten lunch. It was a Wednesday evening, and he was pulling another 12-hour shift at the office, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. He reached for his phone to call his wife, Lauren, hoping she could drop off the lunch he had accidentally left on the kitchen counter. When she didn't answer after 3 calls, a strange feeling crept into his chest. Lauren always picked up, especially when she knew he was stuck at work. Their marriage wasn't perfect, whose was? But Jason had built his life around the belief that working hard would create the life they both deserved. He dismissed the unease for the moment, chalking it up to exhaustion, and focused on the mountain of work in front of him. When he finally got home just past midnight, the house was dark and eerily silent. Lauren was curled up on the couch, her phone clutched in her hand. Jason gently shook her awake. "Hey, I called a few times earlier. Everything okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Lauren blinked groggily. "Oh, sorry, my phone must have been on silent. It's been a long day." Her explanation seemed plausible enough, but something about the way she avoided his eyes planted a seed of suspicion in his mind. Jason let it go, convincing himself he was overthinking. But the unanswered calls became a pattern. Lauren started spending more time out with friends, and Jason's late nights at the office turned into lonely evenings at home. He noticed small changes: her sudden interest in her appearance, the way she carefully guarded her phone, and how her laughter sounded forced when they talked. Jason couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. He reminded himself that he was working overtime for them to pay off their mortgage, to afford the vacations they'd dreamed of, to build the future they'd planned together. But Lauren's distance made him question whether they still shared a common goal. One night, as he stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep, Jason decided he needed answers. The next day, he left work early for the first time in months. He told his boss it was for personal reasons, and though it felt strange to be leaving before sunset, he knew he had to trust his instincts. When Jason pulled into the driveway, a sleek black car he didn't recognize was parked near the curb. His stomach churned as he stepped through the front door. The sound of muffled laughter drifted from upstairs, and he froze. He took a deep breath and walked up the stairs, his heart pounding with each step. The laughter grew louder, and he followed it to the master bedroom. The scene he walked into would be burned into his memory forever. Lauren was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hand resting on the thigh of a man Jason had never seen before, a younger, cocky-looking guy with a smug grin plastered on his face. The two jumped apart when they saw him, but the damage was already done. "What the hell is this?" Jason demanded, his voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. Lauren stammered, "Jason, it's not what it looks like." "Don't insult my intelligence, Lauren," he snapped. "You think I'm an idiot? I'm out there working overtime to keep this house running. And this is how you repay me. You bring him into our bed." The man had the audacity to stand up, as if to defend himself. "Look, man, maybe you should calm down." "Shut your mouth," Jason barked, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Get out of my house, now." The man hesitated, glancing at Lauren for guidance, but Jason's glare left no room for argument. He grabbed his shoes and bolted out the door without another word. Jason turned his attention back to Lauren, who looked as though she might cry. "You've got 10 seconds to explain yourself," he said coldly. Lauren's bottom lip trembled. I didn't mean for it to happen. You're always at work, Jason. You're never here. I was lonely." "Don't you dare pin this on me," he interrupted, his voice rising. "You think working late is fun for me? I was doing it for us. For you. And this is what you do in return." "I didn't know how to tell you." "You didn't tell me because you didn't want to get caught," Jason snapped. "You didn't care about me, Lauren. You cared about what you could get away with." The argument escalated into a heated back and forth, but Jason had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. "I hope it was worth it," he said bitterly before walking out of the room. For the rest of the night, Jason stayed in the guest room, his mind racing. He thought about all the late nights he'd spent at the office, the vacations they'd never taken, the dreams that now felt like a cruel joke. As dawn broke, he resolved to take control of the situation. Jason wasn't just going to leave Lauren, he was going to make sure she felt the consequences of what she had done. Jason didn't waste any time. The following morning, he called his lawyer. The betrayal still burned hot in his chest, fueling every decision he made. He wasn't going to let Lauren talk her way out of this, and he sure as hell wasn't going to let her keep pretending like any part of their life together mattered. Legal advice was the first step. Mr. Carter, the lawyer, said after Jason laid out the situation, "If you're serious about filing for divorce, gather as much financial documentation as you can. Be sure you know where your assets stand." "Oh, I'm serious," Jason replied, his voice cold and resolute. "What about the house? I've been the one paying the mortgage this whole time." "That will depend on a few factors, but your contributions won't be ignored. Focus on the evidence. It'll help your case." Evidence. That word stuck in Jason's mind long after the call ended. He sat in his car outside the office, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. This wasn't just about ending things, it was about ensuring there weren't any loose ends. If Lauren wanted to play games, Jason would show her that actions had consequences. That evening, he returned home early again. When he walked through the door, Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, like she'd been waiting for him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice subdued. Jason dropped his keys onto the counter with a sharp clink, finally ready to say something that isn't complete garbage. Her eyes narrowed. "You don't have to be so cruel." "Cruel?" Jason laughed bitterly. "Cruel would have been kicking you out last night with nothing but the clothes on your back. I'm giving you the chance to speak, so if you think you have an excuse, let's hear it." Lauren flinched but pressed on. "I never meant for this to happen, Jason. I felt so invisible. You're always working, always focused on something else. And when you're home, it's like you're not even here." Jason slammed his hand against the counter, making her jump. "And that justifies sleeping with someone else? Bringing him into our bedroom? Don't act like the victim here, Lauren. You made a choice." "I didn't know what else to do," she shot back, her voice rising. "We haven't been happy for a long time, and you know it." Jason's jaw tightened. "Then you should have said something. You should have ended it instead of sneaking around like a coward." Her face crumpled, but Jason didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. Every tear she shed felt like manipulation, an attempt to soften the blow of what she'd done. He wasn't going to let her off the hook. "Here's how this is going to go," he said, his voice low and firm. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. We're getting divorced. I'm not wasting another second of my life on someone who doesn't give a damn about me." Lauren's eyes widened in shock. "Jason, wait." "No," he cut her off. "You don't get to Jason wait me. I've spent years bending over backward for this marriage, and this is what I get? No, I'm done." He turned on his heel and headed upstairs, leaving her stunned silence behind him. Over the next week, Jason focused on gathering everything he needed. He combed through bank statements, mortgage records, and insurance policies, documenting every contribution he'd made to their life together. He also began keeping notes of Lauren's behavior, taking screenshots of her social media posts, and noting how often she left the house without explanation. The final straw came when Jason discovered a charge on their joint credit card for an expensive hotel room. The date coincided with one of the nights Lauren had claimed to be out with friends. It was the proof he needed to confirm what he'd already suspected: her affair wasn't a one-time mistake. Armed with his findings, Jason met with his lawyer again. "I want to make sure she doesn't walk away with more than she deserves," he said flatly. "We'll make sure the division of assets is fair," the lawyer assured him. Fair. Jason scoffed internally at the word. There was nothing fair about any of this, but at least now he had the upper hand. The confrontation that followed was even uglier than the first. When Jason presented Lauren with the evidence of her hotel stay, her facade of regret shattered, revealing a defiant anger he hadn't seen before. "So you've been spying on me now," she accused, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't try to twist this around," Jason replied coldly. "You're the one who lied. You're the one who cheated. I'm just making sure the truth comes out." "Fine," she snapped. "You want the truth? I was miserable, Jason. You treated me like an afterthought, and I found someone who actually paid attention to me. I'm not sorry for that." Jason's fists clenched at his sides, but he kept his composure. And now you get to live with the consequences, he said icily. I'll be filing the papers by the end of the week. Pack your things. Lauren stared at him, her mouth opening and closing, as if she wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Finally, she stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. That night, Jason slept more soundly than he had in weeks. The weight of indecision was gone, replaced by a clear path forward. By the time the divorce was finalized, Jason had moved into a small but comfortable apartment across town. The house was sold, the profits divided according to the terms of their settlement. Lauren had fought tooth and nail for a larger share but ultimately walked away with less than she'd expected. Jason, on the other hand, felt like he'd gained everything. Freedom, clarity, and the knowledge that he'd done the right thing by standing up for himself. He didn't look back. Jason stood in the kitchen of his new apartment, sipping a cup of black coffee as he stared out the window. The view wasn't much a parking lot and a row of generic office buildings, but it was his. For the first time in years, he felt in control of his life. The sound of his phone buzzing on the counter snapped him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen and saw Lauren's name. His jaw tightened as he debated whether to answer. Against his better judgment, he pressed the green icon. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone clipped. "We need to talk," Lauren said, her voice laced with urgency. "We've been through this." There's nothing left to say. Jason leaned against the counter, bracing himself for whatever excuse or demand was coming next. "This isn't about us," she said quickly. "It's about the house. There's a problem with the sale." Jason frowned. "What kind of problem?" "The buyer's financing fell through," Lauren explained. "The realtor says we'll have to relist it, and that could take months." Jason pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration bubbling to the surface. "And why is this my problem? You wanted your share of the money so badly, figure it out." "I can't cover the mortgage on my own," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "Jason, please, I'm asking for your help." He barked out a bitter laugh. "Help? You want my help? After everything you've done, you still have the nerve to ask me for a favor." "Don't do this," she pleaded. "I know I messed up, but I can't lose the house. It's all I have left." "Not my problem," Jason shot back. "You made your bed, Lauren. Lie in it." He ended the call before she could respond and slammed his phone onto the counter with a force that made his coffee cup tremble. Later that week, Jason met with the realtor to discuss the situation. He wasn't happy about it, but he knew letting the house sit unsold would only drag out the process. The realtor reassured him they could find another buyer quickly, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren's financial woes were far from over. The next time he heard from her, it wasn't a phone call, it was a knock at his apartment door. Jason opened it to find Lauren standing there, looking more disheveled than he'd ever seen her. Her makeup was smudged, and her usually polished appearance had been replaced by wrinkled clothes and unkempt hair. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jason demanded, blocking the doorway. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason crossed his arms. "Not my problem. Go cry to someone who cares." "Jason, please," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "I don't have anyone else. The guy I was with, he left. And now I'm drowning in debt. I don't even know how I'm going to pay for groceries next week." He stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You're telling me this why? So I'll swoop in and save you?" "Not happening." "I'm not asking for money," she said quickly. I need to talk to someone who understands." Jason laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Understands? You think I understand? Let me make this clear, Lauren, I don't care. Not anymore. You burned that bridge the moment you decided I wasn't enough for you." She wiped at her eyes, but the tears kept coming. "I made a mistake, okay? A terrible mistake. I thought I could fix it, but everything's fallen apart." Jason stepped back, his gaze cold. "Not my problem. You wanted to destroy our life together? Congratulations, you succeeded. Now go deal with the fallout on your own." He shut the door in her face and leaned against it, exhaling a long breath. The sound of her sobs faded as she walked away, but Jason didn't feel an ounce of guilt. He'd given her everything, and she'd thrown it away. Whatever mess she was in now was of her own making. A month later, Jason received a call from the realtor. "Good news," she said. "We've got a new buyer for the house. Closing should happen in a few weeks." Finally, Jason muttered, relief washing over him. The sale went through without a hitch, and Jason received his share of the proceeds shortly after. He used the money to pay off old debts and invest in his future, leaving the past where it belonged. Jason's career flourished in the months that followed. With the weight of his failed marriage off his shoulders, he threw himself into his work, earning a promotion that came with a significant raise. He even started going to the gym, something he'd neglected during the marriage. One evening, as he was leaving the office, he bumped into an old college friend, Sarah. They hadn't seen each other in years, but the connection was instant. They exchanged numbers and started meeting for coffee, which quickly turned into dinner dates. Sarah was everything Lauren wasn't. She was kind, supportive, and genuine, with a sharp wit that always kept Jason on his toes. Their relationship moved at a steady pace, and for the first time in years, Jason felt truly happy. Meanwhile, Lauren's life continued to spiral. Jason heard through mutual friends that she'd been forced to move into a tiny apartment and was working a dead-end job just to make ends meet. The man she'd cheated with had disappeared from her life entirely, leaving her to pick up the pieces alone. Jason didn't waste time dwelling on her downfall. He was too busy building the life he deserved, a life free from lies, betrayal, and regret. Jason sat in a conference room, the hum of conversation buzzing around him as his colleagues prepared for a quarterly meeting. He glanced at his watch, his mind wandering for a brief moment. Life had taken on a rhythm that felt steady, productive, and most importantly his own. The sting of Lauren's betrayal had dulled into a scar, a reminder of what he'd endured and overcome. As the meeting wrapped, his boss pulled him aside. "Jason, I've been impressed with your work lately," she said with a smile. "We're expanding the team, and I'd like you to help mentor some of the new hires." Jason nodded. "I'd be happy to. Thanks for considering me." It was a small moment, but it reminded him of how far he'd come. He grabbed his briefcase and headed out, deciding to treat himself to a quiet dinner at his favorite restaurant. Halfway through his meal, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. Normally, he'd ignore it, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello. Jason, it's Lauren." He froze, his grip tightening on the phone. "What do you want?" "I know I'm the last person you want to hear from," she said quickly, her voice sounding strained. "But I need to talk to you. It's important." Jason's jaw tightened. "You've got 2 minutes. Make it count." "I'm in trouble," she began, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I lost my job, and my landlord's threatening to evict me. I don't have anywhere else to turn." Jason leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. "So let me get this straight. You cheat on me, destroy our marriage, and now you want me to bail you out. Are you out of your mind?" "I know I don't deserve your help," she said, her voice cracking. "But I'm desperate, Jason. Please." Jason bit back a harsh retort, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You didn't think about desperation when you were sneaking around behind my back. Whatever hole you've dug yourself into, you can climb out of it without me." "Jason, I'm done with this conversation," he interrupted. "Don't call me again." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the table, his appetite completely gone. The next morning, Jason woke up to an email from his lawyer. It was a routine update about the final stages of the divorce proceedings, but one line caught his attention, a reminder that Lauren hadn't completed her end of the financial disclosures. He forwarded the email to her without a word, but her failure to handle even the simplest responsibilities didn't surprise him. Instead, it only reinforced his decision to keep moving forward, leaving her chaos behind. A week later, while Jason was in the middle of a meeting, his assistant knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her tone apologetic. "But there's someone here to see you. She said it's urgent." Jason frowned. "Who is it?" "She didn't give her name, but she said you'd know her." His stomach sank. "Tell her to leave," he said curtly, turning back to his presentation. His assistant hesitated. "She's waiting in the lobby." Jason's jaw tightened. "Fine. I'll handle it, he excused himself and headed to the lobby, his anger bubbling to the surface as soon as he saw Lauren sitting there. She looked haggard, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and sharp. "I didn't know how else to reach you," she said, standing up. "You've been ignoring my calls." "Because I have nothing to say to you," Jason snapped. "Now get out." "Please, just give me 5 minutes," she begged, her voice trembling. Jason crossed his arms, glaring at her. "You've got 1 minute. Talk." She swallowed hard, wringing her hands nervously. "I know I've made mistakes." "Understatement of the century," Jason muttered. "But I'm trying to fix things," she continued, ignoring his comment. "I'm looking for a new job, but it's been hard. I just need a little help to get back on my feet." Jason stared at her, his expression unreadable. "Why would I lift a finger for you? Give me one good reason." "Because we were together for 10 years, she said, tears streaming down her face. "Because despite everything, I thought you might still care." He took a step closer, his voice icy. "Care? You think I care about someone who threw me away? You think I've forgotten how you humiliated me, how you lied to my face? You're delusional." Lauren sobbed openly, but Jason felt nothing. "I've already given you more chances than you deserve," he said coldly. "Now leave before I call security." She hesitated for a moment, as if expecting him to change his mind, but his expression didn't waver. Finally, she turned and walked out, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Jason watched her go, a strange sense of closure settling over him. He returned to his meeting without a second thought, ready to focus on what truly mattered: his future. A few months later, Jason attended a networking event where he ran into Sarah again. They talked for hours, their connection picking up right where it had left off. By the end of the night, Jason felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Sarah wasn't just a distraction from the pain of his past, she was a reminder that better things were possible. As they exchanged numbers and made plans to meet again, Jason couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long time, everything felt right.